Just another beautiful day in Russia. Today I'm here in Kaliningrad, Russia, which is a region of Russia that is in between Poland and Lithuania. This part of Russia is home to one of the world's densest river networks, with over 4,000 different rivers and streams that are contained within a few hundred-mile square. I'm getting ready to fish Kaliningrad Bay. Kaliningrad Bay is home to perch, pike, zander, catfish, and other fish, also European eel. So today we're going to be targeting zander. The area I'll be fishing today is also going to be next to a military base, a navy base, so there's going to be quite a few ships parked out front where we're fishing. Russia is a vast country, straddling both Europe and Asia, but its European portion is where the majority of its population, culture, and historical significance lie. European Russia, which extends west of the Ural Mountains, includes major cities like Moscow and St. Petersburg, as well as smaller but culturally rich regions like Kaliningrad. This detached Russian enclave on the Baltic Sea is an interesting place. Surrounded by Poland and Lithuania, it has a mix of Russian, German, and Baltic influences. But beyond its history and unique geography, Kaliningrad is a paradise for anglers, especially those looking to catch walleye in its rich waters. While Russia's sheer size is almost unfathomable, its European section is where most of the action happens. Nearly 80% of Russia's population lives in this part, making it the country's economic and political core. Moscow, with its Grand Red Square, and Kremlin dominates the scene, while St. Petersburg offers a glimpse into Russia's imperial past, with its canals and stunning palaces. But European Russia isn't just about big cities. It's also about home to the sprawling forests, rivers, and lakes that make it a dreamland for outdoor enthusiasts. One of the lesser talked about but intriguing places in this region is Kaliningrad. Once the Prussian city of Königsberg, it became Russian territory after World War II. Being an exclave, it has a different feel from mainland Russia. There's a Baltic vibe to it, with maritime culture playing a big role. This includes fishing, which is a way of life for many in the region. Kaliningrad Bay, also known as the Vistula Lagoon, is a prime spot for anglers, particularly those chasing walleye. This brackish water body connected to the Baltic Sea provides an excellent habitat for these prized fish. The walleye, known for its sharp eyesight and elusive nature, is a favorite among both sport and commercial fishermen. Fishing in the bay is best done by boat, as walleyes, also known as zander, tend to lurk in deep waters, especially during the warmer months. Local anglers often use trolling techniques, dragging lures behind their boats at varying depths to entice the fish. Soft plastic baits, crankbaits, and live bait rigs all work well here. Depending on the season and water conditions, early mornings and late evenings are prime time, as walleyes tend to be more active when the light is low. What makes Kaliningrad Bay special for walleye fishing is its blend of freshwater and saltwater influences. The fish here grow to impressive sizes, with some catches exceeding 10 pounds. The bay's mix of estuaries, canals, and deeper sections provides a variety of fishing environments, making each trip different from the last. Plus, the scenery lined with dense forests and quaint fishing villages adds to the charm of the experience. Beyond fishing, Kaliningrad has a lot to offer. The city itself is a fascinating blend of Soviet-era architecture, medieval German ruins, and modern Russian life. The Königsberg Cathedral, with its connection to the philosopher Immanuel Kant, is a must-visit. The city's museums, especially those dedicated to its maritime history and amber, which is abundant in the region, add another layer of interest. For those who love nature, the Curonian Spit, A narrow strip of land stretching between the bay and the Baltic Sea is a stunning place to explore. It's an UNESCO World Heritage Site known for its towering sand dunes, diverse bird life, and peaceful walking trails. So, right now, we're not having any luck in the canal, so the plan is to move farther out into the bay and target a pit. Zander are the ultimate predators in many European freshwater systems. They prefer deeper, slow moving waters like rivers, reservoirs, and large lakes. Their eyes are designed for hunting in low light, making dawn, dusk, and even nighttime prime times to catch them. Unlike pike, which attack with reckless aggression, zander are more calculated in their strikes, often testing the bait before they fully commit. This means fishing for them requires a bit of finesse and understanding of their habits. Jigging soft plastics is a deadly technique for zander for a few reasons. First, soft plastics mimic the small bait fish that zander naturally hunt. Second, the up and down movement of a jig lure triggers their predatory instincts, especially when worked near the bottom where they tend to hold. Lastly, this method allows for precise control over the lure's action, helping you adjust to the fish's mood on any given day. When it comes to gear, you don't need anything overly complicated, but having the right setup makes a big difference. A medium light to medium spinning rod around 7 feet long with a fast or extra fast action is ideal. This gives you the sensitivity to feel those subtle bites. Pair it with a 2,500 to 3,000 size spinning reel for smooth retrieves and good line control. A thin braided mainline around 0.10 to 0.14 millimeters or 8 to 12 pound test provides great sensitivity and allows you to feel every little tap. Since zander have sharp teeth but aren't as bitey as pike, a fluorocarbon leader, 10 to 15 pounds, is usually enough. We were tying our jigs directly to the braided line and we didn't have any problems catching fish. Paddle tails, split tails, and worms in the 3 to 5 inch range work wonders. Natural colors like silver, pearl, and chartreuse are great choices. Pair them with jig heads between 5 to 20 grams, depending on the water depth and current. Jigging for zander is all about staying in touch with your lure and reacting to subtle bites. Here's a simple yet effective way to do it. Cast and let it sink. Once your lure hits the water, let it sink to the bottom. Keep an eye on the line. Sometimes zander hit on the drop. Lift and then drop. Using your wrist, lift the rod tip a few inches, then let the lure drop back down. Most bites happen on the fall. And then, feeling the bite, zander often nibble before fully committing. If you feel a light tap or a slight change in resistance, set the hook. And then always make sure you stay mobile. If you don't get any action after 10 to 15 minutes, move to another spot. Zander are structure oriented, so finding the right location is key. Zander love areas with structure, drop-offs, and submerged trees, rocky bottoms, and riverbeds. In lakes and reservoirs, they often hang around deeper holes during the day and move to shallower feeding zones at night. Overcast days with a bit of wind are usually best as zander are more active in low light conditions. When you hook into a zander, expect a solid fight. They don't go on crazy runs like pike, but they use their weight and head shakes to try and throw the hook. Keep steady pressure, avoid overplaying the fish, and enjoy the battle. Once landed, zander make for excellent eating, but many anglers practice catch and release to keep the population strong. The Baltic Sea isn't your typical oceanic paradise. It's not known for crystal clear waters, vibrant coral reefs, or massive waves. Instead, it's a sea with a personality, brackish, moody, and full of history. Stretching between Scandinavia and the Baltics and Northern Europe, it has played a crucial role in trade, war, and culture for centuries. And while it might not be the first place that comes to mind when thinking about marine adventures, the Baltic has its own kind of magic. One of the strangest things about the Baltic Sea is that it's neither fully salty nor fully fresh. It's somewhere in between. This is because it's semi enclosed, with limited access to the North Sea through narrow straits around Denmark. Rivers from across northern and eastern Europe pour fresh water into the Baltic, diluting its salinity. As a result, it's a tough place for marine life. Not all saltwater species can survive here, and most freshwater species don't quite thrive either. But those that do, like cod, herring, and the famous Baltic salmon, have adapted to this unusual environment. If the Baltic could talk, it would have some insane stories to tell. It's been a major route for Vikings, medieval traders, and powerful navies. The Hanseatic League and medieval trade network thrived along its coasts, connecting cities like Lubeck, Riga, and Tallinn. But it's not just a sea of commerce, it's also a graveyard. The cold, low oxygen waters of the Baltic have preserved thousands of shipwrecks, some dating back to the Viking era. Even warships from World War II lie eerily intact on the seabed, making it a dream for wreck divers and history buffs alike. And then there's the famous Baltic Sea anomaly. In 2011, a Swedish diving team discovered a bizarre circular structure on the seafloor that looks like something out of a sci-fi movie. Some say it's a natural rock formation, others claim it's a sunken UFO. Whatever it is, it just adds to the mystery of the Baltic. While the Baltic isn't known for tropical beaches, its coastlines have their own kind of rugged beauty. Sweden's rocky archipelagos, Estonia's wild forests, and Poland's long sandy beaches all offer breathtaking views. Cities like Stockholm, Helsinki, and St. Petersburg sit along its shores, blending history with modern culture. The Curonian Spit, an UNESCO World Heritage Site stretching between Lithuania and Russia's Kaliningrad, is home to massive sand dunes that feel almost otherworldly. And let's not forget the Northern Lights. While not as famous as in Norway or Iceland, places around the Baltic, especially in Finland and Sweden, offer incredible views of the aurora borealis during winter. Imagine standing on a frozen beach watching green and purple lights dance over the icy sea. For those who love the water, the Baltic offers plenty of adventure. Fishing is a huge part of life here. The anglers targeting perch, pike, and the elusive zander in the brackish shallows. Baltic herring is a staple in local cuisines, showing up in everything from pickled dishes in Sweden to hearty soups in Latvia. Sailing is also a big deal, with thousands of islands and inlets to explore. In the summer, the Baltic transforms into a sailor's paradise. With long daylight hours and scenic harbors, the Gulf of Finland and the Stockholm archipelago are especially popular among yacht enthusiasts. Despite its beauty and history, the Baltic has its challenges. It's one of the most polluted seas in the world, with issues like algal blooms and dead zones caused by agricultural runoff and industrial waste. Conservation efforts are underway, but restoring balance to such a unique ecosystem isn't easy. Climate change is also affecting ice over and water temperatures, leading to shifts in fish populations and marine life behavior. So the location we're fishing right now is where an old German boat sank when they were trying to escape during the end of World War II. As World War II came to a brutal close, the German city of Königsberg, now known as Kaliningrad, became a death trap for the Nazis and civilians trying to flee the advancing Soviet army. In early 1945, the Red Army was tearing through East Prussia, pushing back Hitler's crumbling forces with relentless force. The writing was on the wall. Königsberg was doomed. Desperate to escape, thousands of Germans, including soldiers, officials, and civilians, made a frantic run for the Baltic Sea, hoping to sail to safety. But for many, the sea would become their grave. By January 1945, Königsberg was encircled. The city had been bombed into oblivion by the British in 1944, and now, with Soviet forces closing in, chaos reigned. The once proud German stronghold was collapsing, and people knew what was coming: Soviet retribution for years of Nazi brutality on the Eastern Front. The only way out: the Baltic Sea. The German Navy, Kriegsmarine, scrambled to evacuate as many people as possible in what became known as Operation Hannibal, one of the largest naval evacuations in history. Hundreds of ships, from warships to small fishing boats, were packed with desperate refugees, wounded soldiers, and high-ranking Nazis trying to escape to safer German-held ports. But the Baltic wasn't a safe haven. Soviet submarines, aircraft, and warships lurked, ready to strike. As the Germans fled, some of the worst maritime disasters in history unfolded. One of them being the sinking of the Wilhelm Gustloff on January 30th, 1945. The most infamous tragedy of them all, the Wilhelm Gustloff, a former cruise ship turned transport vessel, left the port of Gotenhafen, modern-day Gdynia, Poland, with over 10,000 people on board. Far beyond its capacity, most were civilians, but also Nazi officers and wounded soldiers. That night, a Soviet submarine, S-13, commanded by Captain Alexander Mariensko, fired 3 torpedoes, and within an hour, the Gustloff was gone. Over 9,000 people died, the worst maritime disaster in history, yet one that few talk about compared to the Titanic. Another one, the Steuben, on February 10th, 1945, was another overloaded German ship. The Steuben was carrying over 4,000 wounded soldiers and refugees when the same Soviet submarine S-13 struck again. 2 torpedoes hit and the ship went down in just 20 minutes. Only a few hundred survived. And finally, the Goya on April 16th, 1945. By April, Königsberg had fallen, and the last stragglers were still trying to escape. The Goya, a transport ship crammed with 7,000 to 8,000 people, was torpedoed by a Soviet submarine and sank in 7 minutes. Almost everyone on board perished, making it one of the deadliest shipwrecks of all time. The sinking of these ships was a tragic yet little discussed part of World War II. While the Nazis were responsible for unimaginable atrocities, the people on board these doomed vessels were a mix of soldiers, civilians, and wounded men who had little choice in their fate. The Soviets, seeking revenge for the horrors inflicted on their land, showed no mercy. What's eerie is how well preserved many of these wrecks are in the cold, oxygen-poor depths of the Baltic. Divers who have explored the wrecks describe eerie scenes: shoes still lined up in hallways, children's toys scattered on the seabed, and entire sections of the ships eerily intact, frozen in time. The sinking of these escape ships symbolized the final chaotic downfall of Nazi Germany. The Reich, which had once envisioned itself as an unstoppable force, was now reduced to terrified refugees crammed onto overcrowded ships, fleeing for their lives, only to find death at sea. Today, Kaliningrad stands as a Russian exclave, with little trace of its German past. But the waters off its coast hold the ghosts of history, wrecks that serve as grim reminders of how war spares no one, not even those trying to escape. Because of its semi-closed nature, Kaliningrad Bay has a lower salinity than the Baltic Sea, but isn't completely fresh either. It gets a steady flow of fresh water from rivers like the Pregolia and Nemunas, which makes the water brackish, just salty enough for some marine species to survive, but fresh enough for river fish to thrive too. This creates a fascinating mix of species you wouldn't normally find together. The Pregolia River, or simply the Pregol, isn't the longest or most famous river in Europe, but for Kaliningrad it's been a vital artery for centuries. Flowing through the heart of the city before emptying into Kaliningrad Bay, the Pregolia has shaped the region's history, industry, and daily life. Once a key trade route for the medieval Teutonic Knights, and later an important shipping lane for Prussian and Soviet industries, today it remains a symbol of Kaliningrad's unique past and present. The Pregolia winds through Kaliningrad Oblast, reaching about 123 kilometers before merging with the bay. Historically, it was the lifeblood of Königsberg, the former German city that became Kaliningrad after World War II. Back in the medieval days, knights and merchants used the river to transport goods, while fishermen relied on its waters for the daily catch. One of the most famous historical connections to the Pregolia is Immanuel Kant, the legendary philosopher who lived in Königsberg. His daily walks around the city were so predictable that people could set their clocks by them. The famous Seven Bridges of Königsberg problem, a mathematical puzzle about crossing all the city's bridges without repeating, was based on the bridges spanning Pregolia. Immanuel Kant, one of the greatest philosophers of all time, born in 1724 in Königsberg, Kant spent almost his entire life in the city, never traveling far from home. Yet, despite his limited travels, his ideas shape the way we think about knowledge, morality, and the universe itself. Kant was known for his strict routines. He lived such a predictable life that people in Königsberg could literally set their clocks by his daily walks. Despite being a bit of a homebody, his mind traveled far beyond the city. He asked big questions. What can we truly know? How do we experience the world? What makes an action right or wrong? His most famous work, Critique of Pure Reason in 1781, revolutionized philosophy by arguing that our minds actively shape our experience of reality, rather than just passively receiving information. So at this point, we're not really catching anything, so my guide offered to show us a German bunker that has not been really disturbed since World War II. He says that the bunk beds still have springs, so we're going to go check that out. By 1945, World War II was in its brutal final months, and the German war machine was crumbling. The Red Army was storming across Eastern Europe, and Hitler declared East Prussia a fortress that must be defended at all costs. That meant reinforcing its defenses, especially along the coastline and Kaliningrad Bay, where a Soviet amphibious assault was always a possibility. The Germans had already built an extensive bunker system across East Prussia. Concrete command posts, machine gun nests, and underground shelters and artillery positions, all designed to slow down the inevitable Soviet onslaught. Many of these bunkers were scattered along the shores of Kaliningrad Bay, hidden in dunes and forests ready for battle. In early 1945, the Battle of Königsberg erupted, and the Red Army attacked with overwhelming force. The once proud Nazi defenses crumbled under Soviet artillery and air raids. The bunkers, though built to withstand heavy fire, couldn't hold off the sheer numbers of Soviet troops. By April 1945, Königsberg had fallen, and the remaining German soldiers either surrendered or tried to escape across the Baltic. many drowning when Soviet submarines sank their ships. Some bunkers were completely destroyed, others were abandoned as the German army collapsed. One house still remains standing today. The house has a roof that is actually made with poured concrete, which you can actually see where mortar shells landed on the roof and left a slight indentation. My guide is planning on turning this house into a clubhouse. That way, whenever he brings people on the island to do overnight fishing, they have some place to stay. I have never seen a house with a poured concrete roof, but this is what it looks like. It's pretty much in perfect shape, and there's no way that water can really leak through. Almost 80 years later, these bunkers remain scattered around Kaliningrad Bay, like forgotten war scars. Some have sunk into the sand, while others are hidden deep in the forests. A few can still be explored, though they're covered in graffiti, filled with debris, and slowly being reclaimed by nature. One of the most famous bunkers is located near Baltijsk, Kaliningrad's main naval base. This area was heavily fortified during the war, and remnants of the old bunkers can still be found along the coastline. Some are partially collapsed, but a few still stand as eerie reminders of Nazi Germany's failed defense. Walking through these abandoned bunkers, it's hard not to feel a sense of history pressing down on you. The thick concrete walls, rusting metal doors, and empty gun ports tell a story of a desperate last stand, of soldiers who once believed they were defending an unbreakable fortress, only to see it all fall apart. During World War II, German bunkers weren't just concrete hideouts, they were fortresses of war, designed to withstand bombings, artillery fire, and even direct assaults. Built across Europe from the beaches of Normandy to the forests of East Prussia, these bunkers were meant to protect German troops, command centers, and weaponry. Some still stand today, buried in sand dunes, hidden in forests, or crumbling along coastlines. But how were these massive structures actually built? Let's take a look at the process that turned concrete and steel into some of the toughest military defenses of the 20th century. The Germans didn't just build bunkers randomly, they were strategically placed along coastlines, near cities, and deep in forests. The most famous bunker networks are the Atlantic Wall, a massive coastal defense line stretching from Norway to France; the Siegfried Line, a defensive wall along Germany's western border; and the East Prussian bunkers, including those in what is now Kaliningrad; and then Hitler's Wolf Lair, a hidden command bunker deep in the forests of Poland. If the Germans were defending a city like Königsberg, now Kaliningrad, they built bunkers near key roads, railways, and rivers. If they expected an invasion from the sea, they placed bunkers along the beaches and cliffs, with machine gun nests and artillery ports facing the water. German bunkers weren't made of ordinary concrete. They used super thick reinforced concrete, sometimes up to 3 meters, 10 feet thick. This made them nearly indestructible to anything short of a direct bomb hit. The concrete was mixed with steel reinforcements, giving the bunkers extra strength. Construction crews often work under tight deadlines, pouring the concrete in layers to make sure it's set properly. If they needed to build fast, they used prefabricated concrete blocks, which could be stacked like giant Lego bricks and filled with steel and cement. To protect against bomb blasts and tank shells, the bunkers were lined with steel-reinforced doors and blast-proof walls. The interiors had multiple rooms, including sleeping quarters, ammo storage, and command centers. Some of the bigger bunkers even had ventilation systems, allowing soldiers to survive gas attacks. Camouflage was also key. Many bunkers were covered in sand, dirt, or even fake vegetation to make them harder to spot from the air. Some bunkers were built inside cliffs or underground, making them nearly impossible to destroy. A bunker wasn't just a hiding spot, it was a fighting position. Depending on its purpose, it could be equipped with machine gun nests placed behind the small slits in the concrete to protect the gunners, anti tank guns built into reinforced positions to take out enemy armor, observation posts where officers could direct artillery fire, and living quarters for troops stationed inside, sometimes with bunks, kitchens, and water supplies. Some of the largest German bunkers, like those in the Atlantic Wall, even had massive naval guns mounted inside to attack enemy ships. Once a bunker was built, it wasn't just left alone. The Germans would reinforce weak points, add extra layers of concrete if needed, and test the structure against explosives. Some bunkers were abandoned if they were poorly placed, while others were upgraded with thicker walls, more weapons, or better camouflage. These are the shells that were once used inside the guns inside the bunker. We're going to head back to our first fishing location because we think there's a chance that we could still catch another Xander out of there. And our last catch of the day. This one is going to be a little bit small, so we're going to have to measure him, but hopefully we'll be able to take him home too. Next year, I'm going to be trying to go after pike or European eel, which European eel is typically fished at night for.